Thank you all for coming tonight. We appreciate it. We have a small group here in person, and we also have some folks who are participating virtually. It's nice to be back in person. I think this may be one of our first public meetings, something like this, since prior to COVID. My name is Jeff Stabo. I'm the CEO of the Suffolk County Water Authority. I have with me our Deputy CEO for Operations, Joe Corney. Where you go? Oh. I have Brendan Warner, who's our Director of Construction Maintenance, and over here, Kathy Nicoletti, who's the Project Manager in our laboratory, guys in communications, and Seth. So we have a presentation that's going to talk about drinking water, and drinking water specific to this community, Remsenburg-Speonk. We ask if you hold off on questions until the end, but it's a small group. You know, if something's coming up, you may forget it, or if you want to address it right away, it's not the end of the world. We find that typically it's a little easier to do it later, and we'll stay and answer all your questions. We're going to cover a bunch of different topics tonight, not only Suffolk County Water Authority, but specific information about Bremsenburg-Speonk, about the water authority, about the water that you're drinking, about conservation, right? Things that you can do to conserve, about our laboratory and what we test for and what we take out of the water before it gets to your tap. And if you're not connected to the water authority, one of the highlights is going to be a program, a new program that we have, which will hopefully entice you to get on public water, know that it's safe and protecting yourself and your family. Before we get into that, though, I want to thank Suffolk County Legislator Bridget Fleming and Southampton Town Councilman Joe Boudreaux for attending tonight and for offering support and for helping to spread the word. Your support has been instrumental, and thank you so much for taking the time to do this tonight. Bridget, would you like to say a few words?
Sure, thank you, Jeff. I just want to, so I'm Bridget Fleming, I represent the district in the Suffolk County Legislature. And I just want to, I wanted to be here with the community tonight because there's been so much work that's been done for many, many years. And I see Bob Moser and Craig Gallonage here who have been fighting the good fight for a long, long time. Jeff and his team are going to be presenting on a lot of things that we're already doing along the lines of conservation, as well as protection and mitigation against groundwater contamination. But I would like to just say that, the Speonk plume has been the subject of study for as long as I've been in public office, and that's over 10 years now. And I know Craig and especially Bob have been on the front lines of that. Initially, the concern was volatile organic compounds, VOCs, and more recently, when the governor ordered the study of perfluorinated compounds, PFOA and PFOS, they were again detected here in this area, in the same boundary area as the Speonk plume. And so, we went to work trying to figure out how to remediate it. As we had, when it was just the VOCs that we were focused on, it was impossible to assign what's called a responsible party status to any individual entity. The health department just couldn't find it. And so because of that, they could not, the law prohibited them from doing a full-on Superfund cleanup. But the bad news is that this perfluorinated compounds are being found pretty much everywhere in this district on the South Fork, which is my legislative district. They're more than anywhere else in the county. But the health department working with Suffolk County Water Authority, and I cannot say enough about how they work to find funding, to find support from the community, to implement the technical the work that had to be done. They have throughout my district and throughout the county worked to remediate this by providing public water to people who are on private wells that are threatened by these contaminants. So we were able to get the plume site classified not exactly as a Superfund site, but certainly as a site of concern. But better than, and we're continuing to work on that, and Bob and Craig are continuing to work on it, as is Councilman Bouvier, who's been working for a long, long time. But this program that you hear about that provides for funding to support folks moving on to public water is going to be very important here, because Jeff will tell you that once a certain threshold is met in terms of private wells that are served by water where there's been a detection of contamination, then Suffolk Water Authority is going to offer this program where you can extend your payments and really reduce the amount of your annual payments, which can be considerable over the 5 years, in 25 years. But just to give full information before I turn it over, I want to let you know that there were 92 potential private wells that were identified in the study site. Now this goes back, I don't know, Bob, to 2007, I know, or yeah. So and the boundaries were changing when Suffolk County Department of Health Services installed monitoring wells and a very extensive monitoring program to figure out where the contamination was. So they identified 92 private wells that could potentially be impacted. 56 have been tested. Some people were unable to be contacted. Some people refused to have their water tested. But we now, of the 92, we now know the results for 56 of them. 17, I'm sorry, let me just say, with regard to the perfluorinated compounds, 9 wells were above what's called the MCL, the maximum contaminant load, before which the health folks are going to say, your water could damage your health. There were perfluorinated compounds found in 32 wells, but below that maximum contaminant load, which, by the way, we got reduced. Used to be 70 parts per trillion, it's now 10 parts per trillion, because of that advocacy that came out of partly this community. With regard to these other 2 contaminants that are very serious and have been detected, 1,4-dioxane, and sure Jeff will tell you more about it. 2 wells were found to be above 1 part per billion, and 6 were found to be containing 1,4-dioxane at all. And then with regard to the VOCs, the culprits that started the whole darn thing, 3 were found to be above the maximum contaminant load, and 15 were below. There are 0 wells that haven't been tested that belong to folks who want them tested, who have been contacted. So along with this public outreach for getting involved in the program that Jeff is talking about, if you know of anyone who wants their well tested, who has not been tested, we will do it. But the bottom line is, because there are names here, we will be able to extend public water to you, and the cost per year will be greatly reduced because it's going to be extended out to a 25-year period. So I'm happy to stick around and answer questions. I really want to just support. I know John as well wants to support what these folks are doing. Obviously, clean water and healthy water is a critically important part of not only quality of life, but the health landscape that all of us and our families are entitled to. So that's why we're here to be helpful. I'll stick around for questions, but I guess, Jeff, thank you for a chance to talk, and thank you for your partnership.
We appreciate it. I'll start a little bit by talking about why we do this. This is called WaterTalk, right? And this is something that
move over.
Okay.
Right in the middle.
There's a lot of information out there about drinking water. It can be confusing. Over the last several years, drinking water nationally has gotten a lot of attention, and you can cite certain areas across the country. We get updates and look at acoustic falls and things like that. Where people are starting to pay quite a bit of attention to it. Certainly, PFAS and PFOA nationally are getting tremendous attention at the congressional level and certainly locally here in New York State. It can be confusing. So this is an attempt. These types of meetings are an attempt for us to go community to community talking about your specific drinking water. There we go. So we go from Melville to Montauk. We started this maybe 2016, 2015. We do one every couple of months. It was a little awkward with COVID. So we continue to do them during COVID. And we get anywhere between maybe 25 and 75 residents come out, learn a little bit about what they're staff is here, they're the experts, right? I can open it, say a few words, and try to sound really smart, but the folks here are the real water industry professionals, but we'll all be able to answer questions as we move along. As I mentioned earlier, we'll talk about local infrastructure, issues that we see in the area. We'll talk about a program that we developed a few years ago called WaterTalk, which is a place you go online, type in an address, your own address, your home address, your parents' address, your kid's address, and if you live in Suffolk, and talk specific drinking water quality for that residence or that parcel. That's pretty cool. We started that a few years ago. We can also check for different compounds. You hear a lot of these terminologies going around. We test for over 400 different compounds. By going to this website, going to WaterTrack, typing in an address, you can start clicking on a map of Suffolk County and pull up specific levels for certain compounds across the entire county. And Nassau County too. We had folks in Nassau County join us in this initiative a few years ago. We're also going to talk about using water smart, right? It's an aquifer. We have plenty of water. It's going to last hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years. If it stopped raining today, we would have a supply of drinking water. But that does not mean that we should just waste it and use it as much as we like. We want to preserve it for future generations. We think that stewardship very seriously, right? We're all stewards of the aquifer. We want to leave it better than when we found it. And most importantly, we're here to take your questions. So what is the Water Authority? Water Authority is an independent public benefit corporation operating under public authority law in New York State. We serve about 1.2 million people from Melville to Montauk. We have about 400,000 customers. There are still people on private wells not connected to the Water Authority. Probably around 25,000 or 30,000. That number, we're still trying to get a really hard figure on that, but we estimate between 25 and 30,000. And then some other folks in Suffolk may live in the Riverhead Water District. Riverhead is typically part of that district. The Hampton Bays is part of that Hampton Bays Water District, very small, that's managed by the town of Southampton. And on Western Suffolk, there are a couple of others, but the overwhelming majority, 85% of the population in Suffolk is served by the water. We began operations in 1951. We don't have taxing power. All of our revenue is generated from water consumption, and we operate as a not-for-profit. Also, one of the largest groundwater suppliers in the country. Something we're pretty proud of. Right here in Suffolk County, when we talk about getting drinking water from the ground across the nation, which is pretty unique. We're one of the largest sole source aquifer drinking water providers in the entire United States. We also have some of the lowest water rates in the country. Average customer probably pays the rent annually about $450 for drinking water. That's consumption plus quarterly service charge. And if you've been paying attention to other water providers across the nation, in many instances out west or down south, they may pay that in a single month or a single quarter just to get clean drinking water. So we're very proud of that fact. That's something that I take a lot of pride in the fact that we do everything we can to keep rates as low as possible, but still do everything that we do to make sure it's safe. We also have 2 AAA bond ratings, like Fitch and Standard & Poor's, puts us in the top 1 percentile across the nation. 20,000 water suppliers, shows that we have fiscal responsibility. We got upgraded about 8 years ago, 7 or 8 years ago. It's the highest you can get. It's helpful to you folks because when we go out to bond for money, to go to the market, to get money to do capital work, we get it at a very low interest rate. If we were shaking a little wobbly with our finances, it would be much higher, and that's detrimental to all of us. So we're proud of that fact. We just had to reaffirm a couple of months ago. Suffolk County Water Authority is not a branch of county government. Although we love Suffolk County government, we're not a part of it. We're not a division. We're not the Public Works, Parks Department, Department of Social Services. We're not a branch. We work very closely with elected officials and legislators, but we're not a part of it. Welcome, folks. How are you? That's okay. Glad you're here. We also, the Water Authority does not create or enforce drinking water standards. That's the responsibility of the United States Environmental Protection Agency and locally the New York State Department of Health. So we don't create them, we don't enforce them, but they make sure that we're compliant to all the regulations. So with that brief intro, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Nicoletti from the laboratory, who will talk about our lab and the things that we test for in the drinking water industry.
Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm Kathy Nicoletti, and I've been with the Suffolk County Water Authority for the past 15 years. So I started my career here as a field technician on the front line, collecting samples in the field. And I worked my way up to a sample collection supervisor. Soon after that, I headed the bacteriology department for approximately 8 years. And now I'm a project coordinator for the Water Authority. So I want to say that I'm also a Suffolk County Water Authority customer, and I'm very passionate about what I do here. My entire family lives in Suffolk County. My mom has lived in the future that I also to. So the SCWA laboratory. SCWA is a state-of-the-art laboratory. Like Jeff said, it's the largest test water, groundwater testing facility in the nation. We test samples at the wellhead at various stages of treatment, and we also test for a wide range of inorganic and organic compounds and chemicals, as well as bacteria. SCWA's in-house standards for water quality are tougher than what the federal and the state regulations are. So we take a lot of pride in that. And last year we tested for 400 compounds, which is 251 more than is required by us.
So I wish I could take credit for that. You know, we're required to test for X number of compounds, 150, but for even years before I got to the Water Authority CEO, we started testing for more compounds. We're up to 400. That's something that we're very proud of too. We're not going to stop. All of that information, all of the samples that we collect, it's in our annual report. You can find it online. You can, again, do a search and pull up information. Pre-treatment and post-treatment. It's very important. What we're detecting in the groundwater and then what we're actually doing. Two different things, but we test it all.
And I'm going to go over the what Jeff was speaking to with the annual water quality report. And I'm always available at the laboratory, so if you have any questions and trouble getting through the report, you can always contact me for that. So we're also testing at a higher frequency than is required from us, from the health department, from the county. And last year we analyzed 75,000 samples, and that led to 181,000 tests. So we're pretty busy. The levels of detection. It's not science-minded. It's a good place to start to speak about what this means. So SCWA is state-of-the-art laboratory instruments. They're very sophisticated and complex, and they can detect compounds in the water down to parts per million, parts per billion, and parts per trillion, which is really small. So I just want to explain a little bit about the levels of detection and what a part per trillion means, because when we're speaking about emerging contaminants, that unit term is thrown around a lot. So just to understand a part per trillion, a part per million is ppm, and that's the equivalent of 1 second in 12 days. And a part per billion would be the equivalent of a second in 32 years. And 1 ppc, parts per trillion, is the equivalent of 1 second in 32,000 years. So that's pretty small. And when we're speaking in water terms, the equivalent of a parts per trillion would be a drop of water in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. So when we talk about the standards set for PFAS and Scwa in New York State, the MCL is 10 ppc, which is 10 drops of water in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. So just to give you a better understanding of what that is. This is an example of a field technician. He is collecting a sample for bacteria in this particular picture. We have approximately 325 of these sampling stations located throughout our service territory. And they're geographically spread out. They're in our residential areas. You might see them anywhere in the neighborhood. They're in our industrial areas. They're near our schools. So it's from these sampling stations that we can test for a wide variety of contaminants and bacteria right before the water enters our home. So you can see our water at the Water Authority is constantly tested from the second it comes up from the wellhead all the way right before it consumes in your house. The way she's collecting the sample, we refer to it as an aseptic technique. So you're out in the field, you're collecting water samples. It can be raining, windy, dirt, so we need to collect it aseptically to ensure that there's no cross contamination from the environment around us. And also, as far as collecting bacteria samples, when we arrive at one of these sample stations, we collect 2 visual measurements of pH and chlorine. So we want to ensure that the wells are run properly and that the right amount of chlorine or lime being added to the water is the proper chlorine control for the distribution. We also collect chemistry sets, we call them chem sets from these sample stations. That's twice a year, and that will consist of everything. So we'll test for all the contaminants, whether it's non-detected, we know that for 50 years or not. We're constantly testing the water. This is an example of the CCR, the Consumer Confidence Report. Some people refer to it as the Annual Quality Report. It's about a 50-some-odd page document that holds all the data for the year prior for our water quality. So you can find it at scwa.com, and you can look up the water specific to your area. Or anybody in Suffolk County, if your parents live in another town, you can find out what their water quality is. You can also read up on current events and different treatment techniques that the water authority is using. So what are PFAS and PFOA? And a lot of us are here to talk about that today. So fluorooctane sulfonic acid, PFAS, and fluorooctanic acid is PFOA. And these are fluorinated organic chemicals that are used in treatment to protect our carpets, our clothing, our fabric. They're in our paper packaging, the microwave popcorn. They line the packaging for your McDonald's hamburger, and our non-stick cookware. And when you're making eggs, you want the eggs to cook right out of the pan. That's made from these chemicals. And they're also found in firefighting fluids. So these are man-made products, and they make things better. I mean, for example, vortex, when we go out skiing or we're golfing, we want the water to repel off of us. So that's PFAS. That's what that material is lined with. If your child spills milk or juice on the floor on the carpet, you usually wipe it up or wipe it off the sofa. That's these chemicals. That's what these chemicals are. I also knew a gentleman who did the fluorination of insecticide containers down in the south. And so if you're not using insecticides, but your neighbors are, and it's not going to be located on the label because it's not the product, but will lead into the insecticide. So as you're walking around your property killing ants, these PFAS and PFOA chemicals, which are also called forever chemicals, they are also can get into the groundwater. So they're also used heavily in aircraft industry, that's popular in the airports and as you know, the U.S. military bases, firefighting exercise areas. So what can we do about CFCs? And that's really the important thing. Well, luckily for us, we can manage them easily through GAC, which is a granular activated carbon. And it removes these chemicals sufficiently, as well as a wide variety of other chemicals like VOC, that's pretty different mentioned earlier. Things of that nature are easily removed from CO2. And similar, in the next slide, you'll see a demonstration of what one looks like, but it's similar to what you could hook up to the faucet or in the Brita pitcher, the same concept on the business. So SCWA began testing for PFAS and PFOA in 2013. So we were planning early on. We were ahead of the curve there. And the New York State Department of Health approved the standard on August 26, 2020, of 10 parts per trillion. Again, which is 10 drops of water in the man-made swimming pool. So the Water Authority invested about $13 million to add 29 CHC systems throughout our service inventory. And as we evaluate 600 active wells, there's only 2 that are currently being blended with other sources to be able to meet this standard. Also, 15 new granular activated carbons are being implemented now, and 14 have been relocated from other areas to be able to ensure that we're getting the highest quality water possible. So, as I said, PFAS and PFOA are removed from water using granular activated carbon treatment, and 2/3 of our wells require no filtration at all. This is pretty impressive. So this is a granular activated carbon vessel. You see an influence and an effluent, and the carbon media sometimes is mixed with the coconut blend, and the contaminants, what happens when water rushes through this carbon, the contaminants bond to the carbon and it is removed. The water is tested at the header pump, which is where the water comes out of the ground, into the influent, out the effluent. We collect samples from these monthly. Some out here, we're collecting them twice a week from these media change outs, because what happens is, as soon as the lab sees that there's breakthrough from one of these vessels, the well comes out of surface. We're not serving that water. The carbon, there's tens of thousands of pounds of carbon in those vessels. The carbon will be changed out. And then we'll test again more frequently, the same process, to ensure that the media was not contaminated at all, and that it's sufficient, and that all the things that is supposed to be removed, it is. So we also test the bacteria frequently from these vessels as well, and these are a really good source for removing PFAS and PFOA from our drinking water. So I just want to turn it over to Brenda now, but I think it will coming out. Thank you.
Thank you. As Jeff mentioned, I'm Brennan Warner. I'm Director of Construction Maintenance. So I'll just give an overview of the local infrastructure that we have here, and then at the end I'll touch on the financing program. All right, just some high-level stats about the water authority. We have about 600 wells across the island, 200 plus pump stations, 68 storage tanks, with a total capacity of around 70 million gallons. On the average, we're pumping about 210 million gallons with a peak of around 470. And then across the county, we have 37,000 fire hydrants. In addition to that, we have I think it's like 6,000 miles of water main, and we're adding to that year after year. We install about 30 miles of new main a year. This just gives you a map of our service territory. The grayed out areas are some of the water districts that were mentioned. And all those little dots are our wells and pump stations all across the county. So it's a very distributed architecture in terms of how our infrastructure is set up. It's not like we have one water source and we just pump everything through one transmission. That's a topic. So where does our water come from? So you may remember from elementary school, the water cycle, so you're familiar with evaporation, precipitation. But I don't know if it's full. Like,
Yeah, it'll, yep.
All right. So this shows specific to Long Island, we have 3 aquifers underneath the island. And kind of to show, this would be your typical private well, which is much shallower well. And then these deep wells, these are where we pump our water from. So that's from the Magazine aquifer. And the thing to note in this animation is that the shallower wells are more impacted by what occurs on the surface than the deeper wells, which are can recharge from further away, so say from the Pine Barren, can recharge to Riverbank. And then beneath all that is the white aquifer, which we currently don't use. Just an overview of kind of the infrastructure. It's a little tough to see in this, all those lines. This is our distribution map. So these are all different water mains, from some on the street. The different colors indicate the different sizes. So these blue ones are bigger and they'll help distribute the water better. These purple squares, those are well pump stations and tanks. So in the Bremsenburg area, this is the nearest wells and pump stations. And then just some recent projects we've done. So as was mentioned, GAC filters. You know, we've been installing those across our pump stations based on the needs identified by our lab testing of the well water. So we have them installed at Old Country Road, West Ferreira, and Meeting House Road. Those are local well fields to this area. Additionally, about 2 years ago, last year, we installed a major pipeline from Speonk Riverhead Road, which came all the way down to the 24-inch pipeline, bringing water from our Speonk Riverhead Road tank, which was the area where we had excess well supply, and there was demand down in this area. So it was just to improve overall distribution. All right, and then, so as was mentioned, and if you look on the map, most of this area is completely covered with water main already. So which makes it good if you haven't already connected to public water, because the water main is there. So if you want to connect, it's a simpler process than in areas where we don't have water main, and then we have to make a main extension for you to connect. And as Jeff mentioned, we're now offering 25-year financing to connect, and that cost just gets built into your quarterly bill. And then, so just to cover kind of the cost to connect, when you reach out to us and you say you want to connect to public water, there's generally 3 costs that come into it. So the first thing, the surcharge cost. So this diagram on the bottom just kind of shows the 3 parts of connecting public water. You have the water main in the blue on the left, and that's what we'd be installing down the street. That area highlighted in the green, that would be our connection, basically from the water main when you tell us you want to connect to the meter, which would be at your property line. And then the yellow portion would be what we call your private service line. So that would be a cost to pay a private plumber to install that. So those are kind of the 3 parts that go into the cost to connect. And 2 of them, since they're paid to us, we're able to offer financing to lessen the burden for our potential customers. So as I mentioned, surcharge and tap fees can be financed up to 25 years, and it just requires a $500 upfront payment. So up until 2 months ago, 3 months ago, typically you were only able to finance that cost over 5 years, and we required that you paid half your tap fee, so $1,600. You have to pay that upfront. And then, you know, over the 5 years, you would pay quarterly payments. So I looked up in the area, the average surcharge in this area is about $2,000, and the tap fee is $3,200. So this example is just imagine a $5,000 financing. With Jeff's guidance, we went to the board, to ask to have our rules changed to be able to make it easier for, homeowners to connect. So the changes we implemented, the first thing we did was reduce that upfront payment rather than the tax fee. We reduced it to $500. And then we extended the financing term from 5 years to 25 years. So in this example, extending it to the 25-year financing, now your quarterly payment gets reduced to $70, which we think can help encourage people and make it easier for homeowners to get public water. I think that was it. So,
So we have, the next section is on conservation and steps that you can take, some of the programs that we offer, and also a little bit more about WaterTalk. Like communication, Tim just whispered earlier, maybe we should pass the conservation point and go right to questions. It's prepared, it's ready to go, we leave it up to you folks. If you want, we can do Q&A now, or we can answer any questions we have, and then go back to conservation. We can go through conservation, it's probably under 10 minutes, 10 minutes maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
So I defer to the will of the audience. There are,
I'd like to ask some questions.
Absolutely. And just as a bit of housekeeping, if you are following along on Zoom, there is a Q&A button in the bottom left corner of your Zoom call. So just hit that Q&A, type in your questions, and we'll be taking questions from the Zoom call as well as the audience here.
I would like to mention that the conservation part of it is really important.
yeah,
Make sure we do back to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that okay? So we'll do some questions and then go back to conversation? Sir, do you want to start?
Yes, I do. I have been offered a better deal by another agency of the New York State government. Are you familiar with that?
We are familiar with the New York State DEC. If they have a program where if your water exceeds the MCL for PFAS, that they will work with us to connect.
Okay. So they have basically given us a free pass to connect from the 3 component parts that you showed.
That's my understanding. Yep.
Okay.
I can't speak, I think meetings is the way we'd like to at times, but we're all often asked questions of other agencies, like New York State Department of Environmental Conservation or the Suffolk County Health Department. We really can't speak to questions you may have related to health effects or the DEC's particular program. We're here to talk about what we can do, drinking water in the community and the program that we have.
I have another question.
But, that's where we support that, that's a good thing, and we think, if they're going to take that initiative, we're glad to have it.
And can I just make a clarification about that? If Suffolk County Department of Health Services finds that the specific well exceeds the maximum contaminant load, they will discuss with the homeowner that you may have heard from them that there are these options.
Okay.
I mean, originally, the first thing that happens is you get bottled water. If, your water could pose a health threat to you based on the MCL, but then they'll also discuss with you what your options might be for public water. But this program is for anyone within the survey boundary, so you don't have to have had the contamination detected in your well at that level. You're still able to use this financing if you want to hook up to public water.
The next question I have is, what happens to the contaminant after the carbon takes it out? Is it bound to the carbon and never leaches out from it, or do you have to deposit it somewhere? And is there potential for that stuff to leak back into the aquifer?
So Joe can probably best answer this question, but when it comes from the GAC filter, right, as that carbon is depleted, I guess there's breakthrough, showing that the chemicals are breaking through, that carbon, the well is taken out of service, and that carbon is replaced, removed, and taken where,
So it's sent back to we have contracts, we have annual contracts, and we have about 150 of these filters. So whenever our laboratory detects that the contaminant of whatever it is at that location is breaking through the carbon, like Kathy said, take the well out of service, we bring the contractor in, they slurry out the carbon that's in the filter vessel right there, and they bring in a new load of carbon. Carbon basically is water. So it's not like a fish tank where we take it and heat it up or something, and reuse it, we just take it out. We only use virgin carbon. So the carbon that we're getting is never used for anything else. That carbon goes back to the manufacturer, and they typically run it through a kiln at high temperatures to burn off all the contaminants that are in it, and they typically sell that to industrial processes or wastewater processes, where having virgin carbon is not as important as it is in the water treatment industry. Most of the water treatment industry uses it. We spend from about $2 to $3 million a year replacing carbon.
Last question, and then I'll leave. The pumps and the decontaminant units, they are run on electricity, I assume? What happens when we have, as we do often have power outages?
So we're pretty proud of the fact over the last several years, we've been extremely aggressive in getting emergency backup generators. How many did we get on that?
About 130 backup generators in our facility. There's not one at every facility, but our experience is that when the lights go out, the biggest load where we talk about with conservation is irrigation. So most people can't run their automatic irrigation system because they don't have power. The solar doesn't work. So we typically have about 50% backup by generator. And that has served us very well for the entire.
Some of them are mobile, so if there's an issue, we're able to relocate them relatively quickly to ensure that there's no, that's never been an issue. This is something I'd like to point out, superstorm, Sandy, and Hurricane Gloria, blackout. People never lost, we never lost the ability to provide solutions.
But it's interesting because whatever water that you get. Gravity,
our water was tested by the DEC, and we have a very extensive water filtration in the house. So we didn't qualify for any of that. And I got an estimate from the water authority. And I'm just curious, if you have so many pipelines in this area, why did it come to $11,000 to hook up to water?
When was the estimate?
When?
Yeah, was it in the last couple of months, or was it from a couple of years ago, or something?
Within a year.
Within a year, okay, so that is prior to our revised financing plan that we had, but the cost, so we're not for profit, and we don't charge anything other than the cost to put water main in the ground. So we did those contracts annually, and contractors come back and say, $200, $250 a foot to put water main. And in an area where there is a water main, there wasn't water main initially, there's a surcharge established for that particular community. That surcharge is the cost to make sure everyone in that community pays the same amount to get water. So the surcharge here, I'm not sure when it was established.
Yeah, it really varies. Some areas are all within others, and others were an extension. So it may have just been one.
What's the most expensive surcharge in the area?
I want to say it was around $5,000. I think the average was around $2,000. But
Well, I have a quote here for $7,965. That's not including the capping fee. So the total cost comes to $11,000. We also live in a flag lot, so I know that cost is ours, but that's anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000 to bring the water to the house. I find this exorbitant.
I don't know if there's an easier way to try to explain. There are the surcharges for water mains in particular communities. In some instances, it's representing it could be a couple of $1,000s. In some, as you move further out east, where it's a longer distance to run main, some of the surcharges can be $20,000 to $25,000.
I mean, it's the way it works is that the homeowners pay.
So that,
We actually, when we do that calculation, every home gets 75 feet free of water. It's actually pretty well discounted when we do the calculation. But the further apart the houses are in an area, the more water main we have to run to get to the next house. And that simply adds up. Right
So
now,
there-
the current cost is $200.
There is a water marking on the street, it's right next to my driveway.
Well, so what has happened, so here's what happened. So we put that water main in years ago. And when we do that, though, we don't forget about the fact that your house was there when we put it in, but we didn't connect. So we keep track of all of that, so that one day when you do come to connect, despite the fact that the water main is out there, you're still gonna pay for the installation cost of that water main, even if it was put in 20 years ago. That's simply the way it's done. You know, that it's very complicated to do that, you can imagine keeping track of all these lots, but that's exactly how it's done.
But we, you know, if that, if we want to get.
Yeah,
we
we
want
can
to
look at it, give you my
Tell you what-
part. Look at the specifics.
Yeah.
We would love to come walk in here and say, you know what, no one's saying a thing. We can't do that, no, we can't do that right with the beach areas, with the water authority, we have bonds, and the customers. We base it on the pricing that we get for that community when the use put in. We pass that along. So
But a lot of times people say that, they say, the water main's right in front of my house.
Yeah.
Yes, it is, but it costs money to put it in. And you, when you pay that surcharge, you're paying what it costs us to put it in.
Over the past number of years, I've had many incidents, probably more frequently than once a year, probably a couple of times a year, where my water has suddenly turned brown. And, sometimes one will eventually will figure out what causes that. And how, and what does it mean? In other words, when it's brown, can you drink it?
Well, it depends, probably, I don't know if it's necessarily unhealthy, but I probably wouldn't drink it. It could be, as simple as, springtime, the system itself has been relatively quiet. You're not pumping a lot of water, sediment gets built up in the distribution line. And in the spring, when everything gets fired up and stuff, irrigation systems go on, and people start using more water, sometimes some of that stuff can be pushed out, you know, sort of unclogged and come up and cause an issue. That's why we typically have a flushing program where we go throughout the entire service area, flushing hydrants to flush out sediment like that may have built up. It could be internal plumbing, it could be something, if it's hot water from the hot water tap, it could be a hot water heater, it could be internal plumbing. If it's cold water, then it's something that, you know, if you gave us a call, we would come out and take a look and take a sample, we make sure that it was, you know, it wasn't a problem.
Okay, so that's what I should do.
Yeah, for sure. We do that, you know, all the time, and periodically there are complaints, you know, throughout the entire service territory, my water's a little brown. You know, I'm curious, is it harmful to send someone out, we send a tech out, we send a sample to the lab, we report the information back to you. It's a big system, it's enough water to get from here city to
Siberia.
Siberia, there's a lot of water main, and at times that does happen.
And sometimes when you call, you will know where our foods are flushing, because we preventively flush the system, and the system has way. And we'll come in with 3 or 4 people in an area like Remsenburg, and we'll flush all the water main over the course of a couple of days. During that time, sometimes our low and worst enemy at that point, because we're purposely running fire hydrants at a high rate to flush out sediment that is settled at the bottom of the pipe. Well, guess what happens? That creates some groundwater for people. And a lot of times we get those things. So if you call in when you have one, a clerk can take a look at a map, a live map, and see where our people are working. And very often they'll tell you, oh, we apologize, we're flushing the water main.
And that's a time that you want to run with this water, you, how about you there? I'm trying to understand.
Sure. Whether it's of a concern, I mean, it's typically iron, that's what settles out in the bottom of the water main. It's not hazardous, it's naturally occurring, it's what comes out of the wells, it's what's coming out of the ground. But a lot of times people stay in their clothes when they run a washing machine. So we tell people, don't do that. The typical advice we give you if you have groundwater coming out of your tap is to just run a pencil thin string. Typically will clear up in an hour. And again, there are a number of disturbances that can cause. It could be a tree sprayer that hooked up to one of our hydrants to fill his tank on the back of his truck. And he opens up the hydrant furiously because he wants to get to the next job. And in the process of doing that, he's cleared up the water. So there are a number of different things that could cause it, but don't ever hesitate to call.
So where does the homeowner find the phone number to call?
It's on your bill.
Jim, what's the number
Yeah.
of,
Phone number is 698-9500.
It's also probably on our website.
Joe's 563-842?
No advantage.
I know where you're looking now.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment on this gentleman's situation. He and bringing in, water to his well, it sounds like it exceeds the MCL. Those results were done over the last year. Those samples were collected by Suffolk County Health Department over the last year. Now, they've been trying to get more and more people to get their wells sampled. I've been trying to help them with that through the Facebook group that I run here in the community. So I don't know how successful that has been, but clearly there are still some people that haven't responded. Other people, of course, they had their wells tested, and if their well was tested and it was below the MPL, then obviously this is a program for them. But I think it's important for people to realize in this room and the community that groundwater doesn't just sit there. It is constantly moving. It moves at roughly a foot a day, generally speaking. So your well may be good today, but it may not be good tomorrow. And so it is something that if you decide you're not going to look up for whatever reason, it's really on your shoulders to make sure you have that well tested every year. And Suffolk County Health Department does provide that service. That's a great point. Okay? And that's one of the benefits of being a customer of the Suffolk County Water Authority. You don't have to worry that we're doing that. Because your water quality will change.
Yeah, when I first moved to the community in the 90s, as a groundwater geologist, and working in the contamination industry, cleaning up sites, I moved here with my family. There was no public water. I had my own private well, but understanding wells and pumps and water quality, that was something I did annually. I had a sample collect. I had the department come collect a sample and manage, get our well work was fun. But then when the opportunity came, when the pipes came down the street, then I hooked up because nothing else is really a value added to the project. You don't have to do with private well. Me personally, professionally, it wasn't a big deal, but the average person would just turn on the tap and make water.
We hear from people all the time, they say, oh, my well was supposed to be fine.
Yeah.
And I'll say, well, when you
That's
well, when you moved in 10 years ago.
Right.
Also, what did they test for?
Right.
Well, that's
right.
right. With the new emergency contaminant, that's another hit.
I'd like to chime in. I really appreciate that point. We have people that deny want to have the water, and the water has changed over time. So if you had the water tested a year ago, that's often possible on the private well. There are people who just simply refuse to have the water tested. And it's kind of an interesting phenomenon at this point. But one thing about some kind of water that I admire a lot is the amount of work we do. And given the technology that are in place now, we have this opportunity to adopt a great program that we're offering to exactly solve that problem. So I would encourage anyone who can contact us to get their well tested.
Again, it's not a simple matter of just collecting a sample from the faucet and bringing it to the lab. There are protocols for collecting these samples, especially for VOC, aerating, comes from the aerator in the kitchen sink, no. And then, of course, with the new emergency compounds, the cross contamination is huge.
And the first is, if I can address getting, a response or getting people's attention and urging them to get their well tested. Just for this meeting alone, well, it's one of the things up there. We have monthly conference calls. I think there's one on Thursday. Between the water authority, the county health department, elected officials at times, New York State DEC, New York State Health Department, and others discussing not only this area, but another maybe 30 or so areas across Suffolk County, right? And trying to be creative and trying to discuss what's been sampled, what's the update for the month, how many new people have been sampled, the results back, what are the results, what can we do to spread the word and encourage people to get connected, to get samples and then hopefully connected. So this is an issue that at many different, state level, local level, elected officials, everyone's, sort of, committed to trying to spread the word. But this particular, we invited folks, through email, we invited residents through,
Letters, phone
a
calls.
direct letter, an automated call, and then also staffed a couple of other employees went door to door to those who were not connected, so that we could try to spread the word as much as possible. So, maybe there's something else we can do, let me know, we'll do it. We really struggle with that, trying to grab people's attention about these points.
Yes, we said those were monthly.
Yeah, not there monthly. Yeah.
I wasn't aware of that, it's great. Yeah, I'll definitely plug in.
I have a couple of questions regarding WaterTalk. First question, the simplest one is how do I access?
We will cover that. We've got some slides on how you, what it looks like and how you access it. Yep.
You want to get into that? Is that okay? You want to go back to the conservation?
We actually have 3 questions from the folks who are attending virtually. We've got no more questions in the room. So they're on the screen now. Our first question is, private water tanker trucks fill their trucks from local fire hydrants. Do some of them have agreements with SCWA for this practice? Is there a way to stop this from happening?
They all should have a permit from SCWA. So if you see any vendor, anyone other than SCWA at a hydrant, other than, for fire purposes, street sprayer, street sweeper, many different, landscapers, they have to come to us and get approval to use the hydrant. They report back how much water they take, and it's something that we monitor pretty closely.
And they apply for a permit as part of that permitted approval process. They bring their truck to our facility, we take a look at it, make sure there's a proper backflow protector on it.
Yeah, so nothing gets back.
Yeah, so nothing gets back to the system. And then, like Jeff mentioned, they report their usage and pay for it.
But if you see somebody, company using a hydrant without a decal, you should have an SCWA decal on the truck. That's something that you should report, to SCWA, and we'll take a look and find out what's happening and try to prevent it.
All right, next question is, how many homes in the Remsenburg community are not currently attached to SCWA?
We had, the scale of Bremsenberg is around 83. Our door-to-door outreach, we discovered some of those 83 are
Yep.
now taken, but on the order of 80 homes right now.
All right, and the last question, how far south has the plume flowed as of today? I'm not sure which plume specifically.
I don't know the answer to that.
Referencing, yeah.
That's a question that you have to get from the.
I can share a little bit on that. The plume has been detected on Dock Road, very close to where I live. It's that far south of Montauk Highway. It's down to the end of Mountain Drive. So it doesn't look like it has reached South Country Road. But there again, that's the DEC's responsibility is to do that.
All right, and we've actually gotten one more question as we've been answering questions. We here in Remsenburg-Speonk noticed there's an odor from the water running from the faucet. What is that odor? Is it normal?
That's a surprise to me. If you have an odor of some kind, I would suggest you call us and we'll come out and take a look at it, we'll sample it, and we'll find out what it is.
Is that a private well?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm assuming it's from public water, is it public well or private well or something public?
Yep. And if you'd like to respond, you could just throw that in the Q&A or the chat feature, either one of them in the Zoom call.
Yeah, in fact, before we came here today, we looked up complaints. We wanted to see whether there were a lot of complaints in the area after we found 3 complaints.
Yeah.
Some of them were related.
Yeah.
It's the typical complaint that we get today.
The public water.
And typically, before these meetings, we take a look at all the water main breaks, so we can say what a great job we're doing responding to them. But we looked at our map and we haven't had any area.
Over 2 years.
Yeah, in what, 2 years?
Yeah, 2 years, there was 0, so.
But it's important to remember what Dr.
asking that if you weren't listening before, there is a phone number which you can call for water authority. It's 631-698-9500. And that's our customer service. So if you're on public well, CWA well, you can get that tested, and if you have concerns, you focus on those on the house.
And if you're not, you run a private well, you know, you have.
Okay, let's jump back to the conservation and,
Thank you.
thank you. That's your up.
All right. So really quick, we're just going to talk about WaterTrack, how you can kind of monitor your water quality locally. And then we're going to get into water conservation. What are some of the best practices to make sure we're using water wisely at home? So first off, WaterTrack is brought to you by LICAP. LICAP is the Long Island Commission for Aquifer Protection. It is really, LICAP is made up of every water supplier in Nassau and Suffolk. Both county legislatures, both county executives have a representative sit on LICAP. So it's really, the health department, regulators sit on LICAP. It's really bringing everyone in the industry together, all those key stakeholders, to make sure we're doing what we need to do to keep our aquifer protected for future generations of Long Islanders. And the way you can get to WaterTrack is licaponline.com. That's the second bullet. That's our website. And so that data is pulled from well data, that raw water data, and we're also using laboratory or treated water data. And that data, like I said, comes from all the water suppliers within Long Island, including SCWA, which is a huge part of that. So how do I search within LICAP? Once I've gone to licaponline.com, the next step, you'll click a link at that URL that says WaterTrack. It's right on the top bar. And so once you're inside WaterTrack, this is what it'll look like. You'll see a map that looks like this, and you can actually search by specific compounds. So in this case, we search for fluoride, any chloride over 250 milligrams per liter, and you'll see we've actually got one result here near Farmingdale. So you can search by a whole number of compounds, including emerging contaminants. If you're curious about that raw water data, you can find that within WaterTrack. So water conservation, why should you conserve water? Yes, go ahead.
So I can take my home address in there and I'll see data regarding the water system.
Yep.
Supplying my area.
Correct. So there's actually, so in the top left here, you can actually plug in an address, and then there'll be a drop down menu once you plug in that address, and you click on the button within that drop down. It will bring you to your local. Catherine was talking about the consumer confidence report earlier. It will bring that up. You'll be able to report through that data.
The annual data that you publish in that report. There's nothing more current than the annual data.
Correct, but it'll also bring you to supplemental reports for raw water data as well. So you'll have both treated water data and raw water data. By plugging in that address.
And the final question.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that it's like we're drowning in data, so to speak. I'm not a scientist, anything but a scientist. But I'd like to know the reporting from the important things that I need to know about water. I think it's great that you're testing 400 things. I wouldn't even know what probably 405 of those are. So I need you guys to create KPI reports that I can look at as a consumer and understand, my water's okay, we've got to sleep tonight. Giving me a report with 400 test results in it is not really highly utilitarian. So
We hear you, we understand that, and I think historically, many years ago, you may recall, something like years ago, I don't remember that, we would insert and mail to everyone the drinking water from the community, and Suffolk Life went away, they changed it so they could do it online, so we can print it online, we have it available. But if you want more current data, right, that's something that we could certainly come, take a sample, tell you what you're drinking, and you'll have updated information, right? But just recently, I was appointed to this
commission, or the EPA, on rewriting the CCR, on rewriting that annual water quality report so that it's more user friendly. And we were actually supposed to kick off meetings this week with people across the country. This is a federal requirement. And when I look at it, I want to make sure, I'm not a scientist either. I want to make sure I can understand it, my kids can understand it, my parents can understand it. That you're not a geologist or a scientist or a chemist looking at compounds. So one of the things the EPA is trying to do is make it more user friendly so you know what you're looking at. And until that happens, we have Kathy Nicoletti and other folks in the laboratory who will go through it and can tell you exactly what you're looking at, what we're testing for, what it means, right? Where is it found, and they can give you that guidance.
I'm a teacher, and I actually have my students look at that report every year, and to be honest with you, it is not terribly user unfriendly. It is long, it's like 48 pages.
Yeah.
I posted on my, I Blackboard for my students, and I put together probably like 25 or 30 questions, and it's like in the order of how the information shows up on the report, and it's not a cumbersome document, okay? It's not terribly, it's not tied up in numbers and calculations. It is pretty user friendly.
And it's a lot of information.
But there's a ton of information in there, so you will definitely look up 50 pages.
One of the things.
Yeah, that's, it lists each one, and it lists the
It
APL
lists
for it,
them.
and then it shows the high and the low, right? That is the high and the low. That's what-
Yes, and the
So-
average.
And the average. So
And-
and it tells you how many tests were taken of that particular compound. So if you're looking at your home, you're gonna get 400 results. And then you're gonna have to look at each one, to say, well, what's responsible. Oh, and a lot of these, you'll be very surprised, I think, to see NG, but very often it's the same amount of tests, because you don't find.
There's a lot of explanation.
And that's the point, there's a lot of, and I have my students look at it, and I say, look, in the water that the wells, the pumping wells providing water for your home, was there anything of concern? Because it is, there's 400 pieces of information in there, you're not really getting hits over it. It's just, hey, we're checking, we're just checking. Martin, my thing is, I'm
radio.
Not if it's ready with a good speaker.
And it is a college class. It's not like I'm not doing this for like fourth grade. But I'm a geologist, and I kind of think all my students, they really shouldn't get out of my class, because I have a tremendous appreciation for the active system and all that stuff. So I think the document is awesome. If you make it more user friendly, that's great. I'll definitely be happy to challenge you on how you can do that. But I don't really have a problem with it, and how do I know the whole text?
There is also, by the way, in the document, a full page that has, well, the text.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. That's
All right. So, I think I might be preaching to the choir here a little bit. We've got at least 2 geologists in the room, but why should we conserve water? Well, as we know, we've got a sufficient supply underneath our feet. We're not in danger of running out of water tomorrow, but it's not a limited supply, so we still want to make sure that we're taking care of it. Especially because when we use more water, that's more water the water authority has to pump, and even if there's a sufficient supply, the water authority don't pump so fast. You don't want to over pump the aquifer, because that can lead to water quality concerns at that point. You can foul a well or something like that. So what we're trying to do is discourage folks from using water between 3 and 7 a.m. Most people are asleep, but that's actually our highest water usage, especially in the summer, because everybody's irrigation systems are turning on between 3 a.m. and 7 a.m. So we're really trying to get people away from using those times, take that pressure off us. So with the supervisory control or data acquisition, that data command center that we've got, where we're watching every well and every tank level, we're watching the tanks go down, down, down in the summer. We're making sure we're kind of avoiding that peak if we can get people off the food stuff. But I think this graph really illustrates water conservation and the need for water conservation better than anything. If you take a look at this orange line, that's what we're pumping on a summer weekday. The red line is a little higher, a summer weekend. And this light blue line is people watering their lawns in the rain in the summer. So most people, if they do have an irrigation system, it's set and forget it. It's coming on at the same time every single day, whether it's raining or not. So what we'd like people to do is take a little bit more ownership over those timers. Make sure not only that you're getting away from 3 to 7, but you're shutting it off in the rain or if it's going to rain the next day. And then you're watering every other day or even every third day as opposed to every day. That's a really huge help for us as well. Because in theory, a rainy summer day should be the same usage as winter. The only difference here is lawn irrigation. There's no less water being used inside the home, showering, things like that. And you can see how far apart those two groups are.
There's good technology for smart meters that'll do it for you.
Absolutely.
And they're only like $80.
And they look a little bit like this. All right, perfect transition. The best thing you can do is use a smart irrigation timer that's connected to Wi-Fi, because it's connected to the internet, it's measuring local weather patterns. And it knows that it's gonna rain on Tuesday, so maybe I won't water on Monday.
Well, I have rain.
Or a rain sensor, excellent, an excellent way to go. Shuts itself off automatically in the rain, right? Like I said, odd even, it's an important thing to do, smart irrigation system. So if we've got SCWA customers, for the most part in the room, if you have a rain sensor or you have a smart irrigation controller, you can get $50 off your water bill right now, just by showing us the receipt that you purchased one of those systems. Everything after April 1st of 2016 is eligible for that $50 credit. And that paperwork is available at scwa.com/waterwise. It's a very convenient online form. You just type it out, you attach your receipt. I get an email, I approve the credit, and it's $50 right off your SCWA account. So the average residential customer that we have uses just under 130,000 gallons annually. And to kind of put that in perspective, we had one user use 22 million gallons in 1 year. Not only were they responsible for irrigating, but they also had a geothermal heating cooling system, which is very energy efficient. It's fantastic in a lot of ways. But it wasn't using water efficiently. It was an open loop system. The water was coming in and basically just going right out. It wasn't using the same water.
They were getting that from sufficient water?
They were using public water, and we were providing them 22 million gallons. For context, that's more than Southampton Hospital. So one residential user using more than hospital. It was a problem. So what are the, just really quick, the top 10 tips we can give you to use water smartly? The first one is that smart irrigation rain sensors. That's the most important. That's the easiest. Watering less often, every other day, every third day. Looking for this label, the UK Water Sense label, you'll find that at Home Depot and Lowe's, your local hardware store. Anything from shower heads, the faucets could have that UK Water Sense logo. We're going to look out for that. Shortening your showers by a couple of minutes, it adds up, and if you shorten by a couple of minutes each day. And detecting fixing leaks. I mean, a small drip leak really adds up more than you think it would over the course of a year.
And if you own a pool, make sure it's not leaking. I understand one person, 2 minutes amount of water wasted.
I experienced that myself. We have, in a second, I'm going to talk about a program at a water checkup. We're actually going to customers' homes and meet with them and go over their usage with them. And we had one customer that believed it was a kind of easy campaign who had an auto filler on the pool. It was a Haltman liner. The auto filler was going all of the time. The customer had no idea because the level of the pool never changed. How would they know? Shutting off the tap, another tip is brushing the teeth. It's only a couple minutes a day. And like I said, everything is up. Making sure we're only using full loads and washing machines and dishwashers before we're running it. Keeping plants moist with mulch as opposed to overwatering the plants. Maybe if your driveway is dirty, maybe it's dirty in the room instead of the hose. Just a quick tip. And car washers that actually recycle the water as opposed to actually washing your car in the driveway where the hose is just going all the time.
It's better for the aquifer and it'll run off into surface water, and car washes have to continue.
So like I said, the WaterWise checkup program is a free service. We'll send one of our water experts to your home. We'll go over your usage for the last year or the last number of years, and give you kind of a personalized plan to cut in. We also have our WaterWise credits program that I mentioned earlier, $50 rebate for the purchase of any water saving device. That includes smart irrigation systems, rain sensors, includes faucet aerators, includes local shower heads, And that also includes what we call smart valves that actually attach to the service line. And you control it from the phone, you can turn off the little service line. It was actually kind of saving the most water. You want to put it as well. And to take advantage of any of these programs, you can send an email to WaterTalk checkup at swa.com. You can call 631-292-6101, or you could always send us an DM on Facebook or on Twitter. We do respond to those daily. And just really quick before I let everyone go, I just want to talk about another initiative of LICAP, the Our Water, Our Lives program. It's all about educating Long Islanders about the importance of conservation. We're going to be at events all throughout Long Island this summer. We've already done a few of them. We've got more on the schedule. And if you come to one of our events, if you see that Our Water, Our Lives banner, that means we're giving away free beach towels, free Our Water, Our Lives t-shirts to anyone who takes the pledge on ourwaterourlives.com to save water over people 100 Long Islanders have already taken that pledge. And with that, anyone have any additional questions? I think we've got no more in the actual Zoom call.
This is a really technical question, but in terms of your treatment, water treatment for the water supply, is there a phosphate compound that you use for treatment?
We do use polyphosphate in places where we have levels of iron in the water that are below the MCL and not at the point where we filter them out using like a sand filter. Right. Because we do install sand filters to remove iron in places where it's really bad. Right. So one of the first things that we'll do is we'll use polyphosphate. Yep. And that, what does that do? Well, what it does is it keeps the iron in suspension. Basically prevents it from dropping out.
It's typically used in the Hampton Bay.
It's pretty common.
We had one last question that says, why don't we limit the gallonage that people can use at home? Legally, I don't think we can tell people how much water they're allowed to use or not.
But there is now a charge for use of water in excess of what's a reasonable amount or a typical amount. So that's very interesting, that there is an impact to your monthly budget if you're using more water. And so that's one of the reasons why these conservation measures are so helpful, because you can avoid getting hit with a surprise big bill for water if you take some of these simple measures, and you're also helping the community as well, and you're also safe.
So we always had a very flat rate. Where regardless of where you live, or how much water you use, you would pay $1, $25 per 1,000 gallons, $1 per 1,000 gallons. And a couple of years ago, after a rate study, we hired outside consultants to do a rate study. We listened to the state CDC, we listened to a bunch of elected officials, environmentalists, and others. He said, why should I pay exactly the same for using the average 130,000 gallons? And the person next door to me uses 20 million of that. Isn't that it shouldn't they pay more? So the board of the water authority considered this for 3 or 4 years, but they finally implemented a higher tier, a second tier. So if you use more than X number, 79,000 gallons a quarter, 79,000 gallons a quarter, you jump into a second tier and you pay at a higher rate. And it's partially trying to get folks to conserve, to use less water and pay a little bit more.
One thing I did want to say on the conservation, there's another side of conservation. Sometimes you go to work that when you're on, there's chemicals on the runoff, and that's one of the largest contributors to some of our environmental problems. Fertilizers, runoff, as well as other contaminants that end up in the ground and may end up as well. Over years, with lawns anyway, and that water ends up usually as runoff into the it's not about the amount of water, what you pay for it, you do it.
Do you have any statistics on people who overwater their lawns? I suspect most people are watering their lawns more than we do. And that also brings infestation. Mosquitoes love pools of water. The more water you have that's sitting in the soil, the more likely it is that you're going to have disease vectors like bugs, like mosquitoes. So It's not a bad idea to let your lawn dry out and then water it again. There are a lot of good landscapers now who are focused on trying to help people conserve their water and do things in a way that doesn't impact the surface waters and the natural environment, like John is saying. So you might want to just check that out, but it seems to me, or I think the data shows that many people are overwatering their lawns, and there's a lot of good benefits. Your monthly budget, less mosquitoes and more safer and healthier environment, in terms of surface water. So lots of good reasons to conserve water.
So I'll add to that, I'll use a small water district as an example, language one. But also but when people start to irrigate, water tables down, particularly because we're a coastal community, you get saltwater treatment, and you can get saltwater mentioning your fresh water source, and that causes us to retreat. We have to put wells farther back, and we have to extend of your water and everything else involved. So you start to think in those terms, it's actually your responsibility. Just by reducing what you use has such a huge impact on the regular environment. I appreciate leading a lot of those efforts and well to those.
So I've done some very, albeit unscientific polling, but just talking to residents pretty much in every community throughout Suffolk County. And most people are watering their lawns every day and for, 20, 30 minutes a zone. So it's something we could cut back on half by both of those.
You know what, I like that you put the toothbrush example up on the screen, because even though it is a small amount, it raises the idea in people's heads. When you do that every day, if you teach your kids to do that every day, suddenly you're no longer taking the water for granted. You realize it's a resource and it's not just going to run forever, if you run it forever. So it's just that keeping your thinking cap on, about all our natural resources. But I certainly, value as a teaching device. You do not need to keep that water on while you're brushing your teeth.
And I get to the other part of it, I'm gonna applaud Mr. Mosher back there. He's doing all these studies on our ponds and water bodies, and he does this on a voluntary basis. It's really important information to get. We can see where we have to be now, those kind of things. But we also have such a program in the town south and reading program, put in idols, which are designed to remove nitrogen and remove, and in cases where it's through the water table to fresh water bodies. And if you use a lot of water, you're contributing more of that to those inadvertently, but that's happening. So, people within global terms, you start to see all these things moving, but it ends up where, we'll see a report from Bob over there saying, here we have some increase in contaminants, and, we know where they come from, and they're delivered by water.
I just wanted to make a comment about the impact. We've been sampling the 7 local freshwater ponds here, one over in Eastport, as well as in Southampton. But all the ponds that we've been sampling so far, the water was fine. For now, the always stays that way. But I said to myself, I'm working with an intern out of the Long Island Science Center. I said, we owe it to ourselves to take a nice little ride up to Lake Avalon. If you want to see what the impact is of surface water runoff, nitrogen loading, and it was really an ungodly mess. It's really unfortunate. But if you want to see an example of the impact, take a ride up to Lake Avalon and go to South.
Sure. If Southampton town owns the road, are they obligated to run a main? No. No. Obligated to run a main? No.
They own the road, so we're just a guest in the road. So you're responsible for the water main, so you put them in when they're needed. I go to them and say, we're gonna put a pipe in the road, will you give us a permit to do that? They say, yeah, we'll give you a permit, but you have to restore the road.
own all of some are kind of provided with part of the town.
Okay, in any area, you have town roads, county roads, private roads, state roads.
And you did a masterful job on seeing where they had your, not only did you guys do the stack, the recovery of the road was incredible. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you all for coming. We very much appreciate it. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for your questions and your compliments. If there are questions in the future, feel free to reach out to 631-698-5200.
9,500.
95. Or again, you get my direct line is 631-563-0353. We'll take your call, believe any of us, we're here to help answer questions, and if we don't know the answer, we'll get to the answer. But thank you again for coming.
Thank you.